I fundamentally believe that everything you want is on the other side of a courageous conversation. We say, what if this ruins things? What if it makes it worse? We tell ourselves, like, we'll get to it eventually, and eventually becomes never. We have all kinds of feelings come up when we even think about having that conversation. And because of that, we're like, I don't want to have those emotions, so I'm just not going to have the conversation. That open relationship is often on the other side of you starting the conversation that you've been waiting for them to start. This is episode 446 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. What conversation do you need to have? Because I am willing to bet that there is one. There is a conversation somewhere in your life with somebody who matters to you that I think you know deep down you should be having, and you are not having it. And maybe you sit here today and you know exactly what it is, right? It just surfaced for you. Like as soon as I said that, you had one pop to mind. Or maybe you've gotten so good at not thinking about it that you've stopped even calling it a conversation, right? You've recategorized it. It's like, it's just a thing you live with now. It doesn't even feel like there's a conversation to be had because it would be maybe pointless. There's that low grade, like hum of discontent. And you've just decided that this is the price of admission for, this relationship that you're in, or this job, or this season. And I really want to challenge that today. That's the kind of that settling in, or maybe giving up, resigning yourself to something being not as good as it could be. I want to challenge that. And it goes back to the fact that I once asked for something at work when I was working in my corporate job at Procter & Gamble. And the thing I asked for essentially didn't exist in my corner of the company at the time I was asking. And I was 10 months into maternity leave when I did it. So I'm telling the whole story over on Substack today, and you can go there and read the whole thing. But what I want you to know right now is I walked into that room absolutely convinced that the answer was going to be no. And they said yes. And it changed the entire trajectory of the next decade of my career. And that, I believe, genuinely, from years of watching women change their lives and watching women not have those conversations, right? And from personal experience of my own, I fundamentally believe that everything you want is on the other side of a courageous conversation. Not a perfect one, not a perfectly scripted, rehearsed, I know exactly what I'm going to say conversation, a courageous one, right? Not a comfortable one, like this is easy peasy, let's just go have coffee. And no, a really, truly a courageous one. And that's what we're going to get into today. Okay. So I'm going to set this up. What is a courageous conversation? You might have a definition in your mind that's a little different than mine. Maybe not, but I want to calibrate what are we going to define as a courageous conversation? And I think it's one where something real is at stake. Like you have a truth that you need to tell. You have something that you need to explain or ask for or ask about. And something is at stake because of it, and you know it. Like maybe it's your comfort. You're just not going to be as comfortable. Maybe you think the relationship is at stake. It's going to shift or change in some way if you have this conversation. Maybe your job is at stake. Maybe someone's opinion of you is at stake. But there's something about the conversation that feels like the stakes are real. And because of that, we avoid it. Right? We tell ourselves all kinds of little lies. We say, oh, it just isn't the right time. We say, what if this ruins things? What if it makes it worse? We tell ourselves, like, we'll get to it eventually, and eventually becomes never, right? And by we, I mean I think historically, this is the pattern in more conversations than I would like to admit out loud. Like, we put off these really important conversations because they're scary. There's a book, in fact, you might have read called Crucial Conversations, kind of a similar concept. It was written by, I think, Carrie Patterson and a few other co-authors. I can't remember them all. And they make a point in that book that I think we could sit with here. And it's something like, at the heart of almost every chronic problem in our relationships or our organizations, our companies, right? At the heart of almost every chronic problem is a conversation we're either not having or not having well, right? We're either not having or not having well. Chronic problems, not the occasional friction, not like, oh, that didn't go so well today. Some of that you do just, it's not a big deal if you just let some of that sit. We don't have to pick every fight, right? We don't have to go to every fight we're invited to, in other words. But the chronic problems, the stuff that's been sitting there for months, sometimes years, just kind of festering, the thing that you've just decided to live with, there's almost always a conversation sitting underneath it that if we had the courage to have it, we could potentially get a different outcome. But we don't. Right? We just don't do it. And I think it's important to look at why. I have at least two things that came up for me when I was thinking about why. Why don't we have these conversations when we know they would be good for us? One of them is what I'm going to call anticipatory emotions, right? We have all kinds of feelings come up when we even think about having that conversation. And because of that, we're like, I don't want to have those emotions, so I'm just not going to have the conversation. Like we opt out before we even have a chance to be in, because we feel the discomfort of the conversation before it even happens so completely, so vividly, that our brain treats it as if we've already had it, right? And as if it already went badly. We've like rehearsed the worst version of it. They're going to get defensive. I'm going to get flustered. It becomes a whole thing, right? We write I've done this. I've written entire screenplays of conversations that never happened with a full cast and multiple drafts and a director's cut. We're really good at imagining what could happen in the future. So we make these decisions, not really out loud or very consciously maybe, that the conversation itself is the problem. And when really it's the story we're telling ourselves about the conversation that's the problem. And I think Brené Brown talks about this famously. I've quoted her 100 times inside of coaching relationships with people. She tells a story in one of her books, I can't remember which one, about as a way to kind of move through conflict, saying the story I'm telling myself about what just happened is XYZ, right? And just that construct, just being able to say the story I'm telling myself, reminds us that we actually don't know if that's real or not. The story I'm telling myself is that you're mad at me because you left my text on read, right? The story I'm telling myself is that you are mad at me because when I came in the house, you didn't greet me and talk to me, right? But we don't know. We're assigning all of those attributes as though they're true, and really they're just our best guess. They're almost our worst fear. So anticipatory emotions about how this thing is going to go is, I think, the biggest reason that we don't do it. We really we're feeling the feelings before they've even happened. And the second part of it is maybe just a 90-degree turn on the same idea, which is, I think of it as the crystal ball problem. We think we have this crystal ball where we already know what they're going to say. Have you ever heard yourself saying well, I'm not even going to ask them because I know what they're going to say, right? Maybe one of your kids going to their teacher. It's well, I'm not even going to ask the teacher because I know what they're going to say. We don't know what they're going to say. We have a good guess, and that guess is often the one that's protective of our emotions, right? We're assuming worst case scenario because we're if I live that worst case scenario out before I even get there, I never have to find out what they'll say, right? We have that conversation in our heads with such a predictable outcome that we erase all possibility for a real one going differently. And here's what I know from my own experience and from coaching women through this. The real conversation almost never goes the way you imagined. Almost never. And it is almost always better than what you thought would happen. Now, is there a 1% chance, a 10% chance that it's going to go badly? Of course, right? That's why it takes courage to have the conversation. But almost always it goes better than what your fear is telling you is going to happen. And I think one of the reasons we keep avoiding these conversations, in addition to the emotions that it brings up and the kind of story we tell ourselves, is we haven't really connected the thing we want to the conversation standing between us and that thing, right? So, I want this thing off in my future. And if you stay connected to that, to the desire for the outcome, it's easier to kind of get through the messy middle, the uncomfortable conversation that's in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to name some things. I wrote a little list of them here. I'm going to name some things that you might want. And then we're going to outline the specific conversation that is standing between you and having that thing. Okay, and I want you to see if this helps, if you find yourself in any of these stories. And if it starts to actually shape the specifics of the conversation in your mind. So let's take flexibility at work. Okay. If you are like, I hate the schedule at work. It's so dumb that we have to be in the office. I'm in meetings all day, right? I need more flexibility, more control over my schedule at work. I want the ability to leave at 3:00 on the days that my daughter has dance, right? Or I want to be able to skip this meeting that never once needs me to be physically in the room, right? Or I want to work from home on the days that my family needs me to be there. That having that life where you are leaving at 3 p.m., you are skipping the meeting, you are working from home is on the other side of a conversation with your manager where you tell her specifically what's happening and specifically what you need or want. Not a hint, right? Not a hope, not hoping that she'll just figure it out from your body language, but an actual conversation where you take some time to lay out, here's what I want. Here's how I'm going to manage it. Here's why I don't think there's going to be a negative outcome to the company or to you, right? Do you have questions? Could we try this? Like that whole conversation in your mind, when you know what's on the other side is, man, next week I'm living the schedule that I want to be in. That's the motivation. The motivation is, what if it works? What if it all works out? Okay, let's go to a different scenario. If you want to have a closer, healthier relationship with your mother. I hear about mothers a lot in coaching. It's such a complicated relationship for so many women. I feel very lucky that I have a great mother. These relationships are very sticky. If you want a healthier relationship with your mother, one where maybe you feel seen, truly seen instead of managed, right? Where you can be in the same room without like bracing for it. That's on the other side of telling her gently and specifically how the particular behavior she keeps doing is landing with you, right? How it's making you feel. It's not like a general complaint. It's not avoiding her. It's being clear about this specific thing is really getting in the way of us having a healthy relationship. Can we talk about it? And I know there's probably somebody listening who's thinking, I would rather die than have that conversation with my mother. Maybe that's not your top pick. Okay. And there's hopefully someone else listening who's saying, I think I could do that. I think we could get past this one pattern of behavior that's really driving me nuts. If you want a friendship that feels mutual, again, where you're not you're not always the one reaching out. You're not always the one making the plans. You're not always the one who's showing up more. This came up in a coaching call a couple of weeks ago. That is on the other side of the conversation that you've probably been rehearsing in the shower. You probably had this conversation with yourself 100 times, but it only works if you have the conversation with her, right? Where you say, listen, I feel like I'm our team administrator here. Like I'm always the one reaching out. It feels like this is not a priority for you right now. Can we talk about that? If you want your teenager to open up to you, your teenager's coming home, just going to their room, slamming the door, you're not seeing them for hours and hours on end, and you're wondering what is going on, but they won't talk to you. That open relationship is often on the other side of you starting the conversation that you've been waiting for them to start, right? Figuring out how to create a space that's safe enough for them to open up about, kind of meeting them where they are in their interests, being curious about them and letting that sort of draw them out. That conversation, we get so worried that they're going to ignore us, roll their eyes at us. There's a great, I think it's Tina Fey who's in the meme of like what it's like to invite your teenager to dinner. They're like your celebrity crush. You're just hoping that they'll say yes. I think we have these very conflicted relationships sometimes with our teens because they're starting to do exactly what they should do, which is individuate, and we're feeling a little left behind and we want to go stay on the ride for a while. We want to be in those conversations. So your willingness to initiate that might be just the thing. And maybe last one, maybe you have like a team member who you really need to stop doing the thing that is quietly making you crazy. Like they're a peer or they work for you and they're doing something that is just driving you nuts. And that is on the other side of a direct, honest, compassionate conversation that you've been putting off because you don't want to make it weird, right? We used to do this process inside of my company where we had these conversations regularly. We're a little out of practice on this. I have a pretty small team, but we had somebody coach us through this process at one point where every group of 2 people in the company could sit down with each other regularly, like quarterly, and just sort of clear the air on anything that had started to like gunk up the relationship, just little patterns of behavior and idiosyncrasies that we weren't saying anything about. And it is extremely powerful to clear the air, but it takes courage. So every one of those things, getting off of a volunteer board that you've been sitting on that you just have no business being on anymore, it's on the other side of a courageous conversation. So the pattern is the same every time. There's something you want. There is one conversation, maybe a series of conversations, but at least one conversation sitting between you and that thing. And you are telling yourself the conversation either is impossible, right? It's not time for it. You can't do it. It'll never work. We have no idea, right? We have no idea. So my challenge to you is going to be to go have one of those conversations, because when you do, really good things happen, right? I think this is what might actually give you the courage to go have one of these, because I've watched it play out so many times and it never stops being remarkable. Sometimes I say this, my little phrase is like, ask for what you want and you just might get it. Like it's very similar to these courageous conversations, knowing how to ask for what we want. I think when we do that, when we summon the courage to be in a conversation with someone where we are asking for what we want, right? Or saying what we need, or saying what we hope will change, and we get to the other side of that conversation, we feel more confident. Like you walk out of that conversation sort of sitting taller, shoulders back, right? Why? You think it goes the other way. We think we have to be confident to have the conversation. But the reality is the courage that we summoned produces the confidence. Like the confidence is the fruit. So when you do courageous things, your confidence grows, right? You need the courage. Confidence comes after. So you walk out of that conversation every single time just like standing taller. Part of that is just the physical sensation of having told the truth. Telling the truth is such a freeing thing. Like it lifts weight that you didn't even fully realize you were carrying. So if you are waiting to feel more confident before you have these conversations, that's on the other side. Confidence comes later. Okay. Second thing that happens is you want to have more of them. You have one, it goes well, you get something you wanted. You're like, I'm going to have another courageous conversation. What if I ask for something else? I might get it, right? So really, I don't want that to sound like a bad thing. Like, oh my God, I have one, now I have to have lots. Once you've had one courageous conversation and you've felt what's on the other side of it, something shifts, right? It's like when you decide you're just going to clean out that one little drawer in like your bathroom vanity, and you open it and you sort through it and everything looks so pretty, right? And you close it and you feel so unreasonably good about that one clean drawer that like you start the next one and then the next one, not because anyone at that point is forcing you to, just because the result was so satisfying. Again, maybe just me, that you want more of it. So courageous conversations really work in the same way. The first one makes the second one easier, right? Not easy necessarily, but easier. And the third thing that really happens is your life starts getting visibly, actually, measurably better, because the premise is true, right? Everything you want really is on the other side of a courageous conversation. So the more of them you have, the more of what you want you actually start to get. When you think about the women that you know, or men, I guess, whose lives just seem to work, right? They have good relationships. They're like navigating hard things with grace, and resilience. They seem to really like their life. They have a level of fulfillment, like there's a positive affect to the way they move through the world. I'm willing to bet that somewhere along the way, they learned how to have the conversations that everyone else is avoiding. And that can be you. That can be you. Here's the thing about these conversations. Knowing that you need to have them is not the same as having them, right? I think most of us already know about the conversation we need to have. I opened the episode with that. What is the conversation you need to have? It's just sitting there. We know it would be better if we said the thing. We just haven't done it, right? Because that gap between knowing what to do and doing it is big and wide sometimes. And that really is exactly why I built the coaching circle, right? So I've been talking about this for a couple of weeks. It's where we are taking these ideas, these kind of ideas like today that really resonate, and we're putting them to work in the specific situations that you're navigating, right? The women in the coaching circle are showing up with like, this is a real life problem. I actually have this issue with my boss, or I have this issue with a colleague, or I have this challenge with my husband. And they're getting real coaching, right? And real accountability from the peer group who's there, the real women who are doing this work alongside each other. So that's the next level, right? If you've listened to this podcast, this episode or the others, and you're like nodding along, but then going back to your life, just not really changing anything, the coaching circle is the bridge. It's the thing that comes next when you want to actually start applying, right? So those details are always at brilliant-balance.com/coaching circle. So it's just my website /coaching circle. We'll always have it linked in the show notes, but that is something that when you know you're ready to put these ideas into practice, that's where you want to be. Okay. So I'm not going to ask you today to go have your very hardest conversation. Not the 11 out of 10, right? Not the one with your mother-in-law or the one that you've been sitting on for 3 years, right? Not the one that like your stomach kind of drops when you think about it. That's too hard. Start with like a 4 out of 10. I'm a little uncomfortable about this conversation, but it's not going to take me under. Okay. Find one conversation like that in your life right now that really matters, that you've been avoiding or dreading, that would just, it would genuinely be better if you said the thing. A 4 out of 10, right? Maybe a 5. Go have that conversation this week. Go have that conversation and see what happens. And then come find me, like DM me on Instagram. I'm at cskolnicki, easy place to find me. Reply to any of the emails, comment on Substack, right? Whatever makes sense. Tell me what happened, because I think I already know what you're going to say. And if you want the whole story behind why I know that, the one I promised you at the top of the episode, go read today's Substack, because I'm getting into that whole story about my maternity leave over there. Okay, that is all for today, my friends. Until next time, let's be brilliant.